I don't sleep. That's almost not an exaggeration. I average around 2 hours a night on a good night. And that's 2 hours of deep sleep, REM sleep. The kind that your body uses to fix itself. It's been getting worse and worse for a while, but it'll go away eventually. It always has before. I just have to ride it out, keep my strings from unraveling until I can get myself glued back together. They say it's better for you to lie in bed the hours you'd be asleep and just pretend to sleep, because it helps get the body's natural circadian rhythm back. So every night I lie in bed for 8 hours, and I spend 6 of them watching the man on top of the radio tower. There's a window above my bed, and when I'm sleeping in it, I have to sit up to see out of it. I like to be aware of my surroundings, so I installed a mirror on the opposite wall to allow me to see out of it. I have the blackout curtains to ensure that my sleep is as genuine as possible. But some nights I like to leave them open, so I can watch the sky. Down the road from me is a radio tower. It's the largest thing on the horizon, and the top is a little maintenance balcony. The tower's close enough for me to see this balcony clearly. On this particular night, the blinds were cracked so that I could watch a storm approaching in the mirror. Safe in bed. Heat lightning started to strobe across the sky, and it illuminated something moving on top of the radio tower. I sat up in bed, looked out the window. On top of the tower, on that little balcony, I could see the very small shape of a man waving something. He was moving his arms in strange, rhythmic, jerking patterns, facing toward the storm. I'd never seen anyone on the tower before, and I couldn't think of a single reason why this man would have been there at midnight while a storm was coming. I called the police and they sent someone out, but at some point the man left. I don't know how I missed him. He didn't come back the next night, or for weeks afterward. I thought about him a lot, though, and I kept watch every night for him. Something about it bothered me deeply. I thought of his strange, jerking arms, the things he'd been holding. I wasn't sleeping anyway, so I invested in a pair of binoculars, and I kept a vigil for him. Every single night. I didn't see him come up to the tower, but he was there as soon as it got dark. I had already gotten my 2 hours of sleep, and now I was wide awake and ready. I grabbed the binoculars and brought him into focus. He was an older white man in a casual jacket. He reminded me of every single cubicle worker I'd ever seen. Nothing about him was remarkable except the cloth he was waving, which was an almost stunningly bright white. He stared vacantly at the skyline and moved his arms in those odd, sharp movements. His mouth hung open, and even from here I could see that he hadn't shaved in some time. He blinked occasionally, but most of the time he just stared, mouth open, looking at nothing. Even though I was watching him the whole time, I didn't see him leave. He went away again for almost 2 years. The insomnia faded, and I slept very soundly without the mirror, which I had thrown out not long after the last sighting. I wasn't afraid of seeing him again. I threw it out because I couldn't stop myself from waiting for him. I could not get that man out of my thoughts. I did research into the company that owned the tower, and I knew with concrete certainty that that man did not belong to anyone in the city. He was not employed with any government agency or department. So, what was he doing on the radio tower? My suspicions about him began to grow. I researched nearby airports, and he did not belong to them, or at least no one who looked like he did that night. But I felt certain that someone would know him. I found his family in Topeka. The address on the missing persons report was still current. He had a wife, 4 children, and was loving and loved deeply. He'd vanished on the way to his car one morning and hadn't been seen since. The night he came back, I was reading, pretending that I chose to stay up. I saw the orange flag out of the corner of my eye. He was back, illuminated on the radio tower by the light of the moon. His orange flag stood out like beacons, and I grabbed my binoculars, my other hand gripping a pen. I waited until he reached the end of the message and started over again. He raised his arms as if to signal 10 on a clock. I wrote down the letter T. He held his right arm straight out into the side, and the left crossed over to hip level. I wrote it down. Left at knee level, right raised above the shoulder, 5 till 3. Arms out at all sides. Hands at the knee and shoulder again. I wrote them all down. And when he started over, I read the message. They're coming back again.